All right. So now we're going to move on and talk about Teamfight Tactics Fate 2 Festival of Beasts. So this is set 4.5. Let's talk about some of the things that are changing in set 4.5. Starting up with stuff that is going away. Other way. Camera is not reversed. Why does it... We're going to go that way. First off, Moonlight is gone. All the Moonlight champions except Diana are leaving us. So goodbye your Felios carries. Dusk is leaving us. All the champions in Dusk are gone. So your Vayne, your Thresh, your Riven, your Cassiopeia, your Lilia, all gone. The reality is that Dusk was kind of... Dusk is a kind of a weird composition, in my opinion, in that it's really a 2-4 with a bonus 6. And the 4 was really easy to put together, and the 4 was incredibly strong. So Dust didn't like scale linearly. It like scaled in two different areas. So Dust 2, you'd get 20% bonus for across the board for everything. It was like, yay, more spell power. And then you got the 4 and all your Dust champions got 50%, and it was like, holy shit. So just how it scaled made it so that all of these champions were worthwhile to be playing at some point in the game when you got up to 4 Dusk. So there was really never going to be a point in which 4 Dusk wasn't played because of how easy it is to put together and how easy it is to put other pieces around it. So I'm sad to see it go because it was probably the most flexible comp you could play outside of like some of the Enlightened comps we were playing earlier in the set. But it probably needed to go because it was doing a little more work than I think. All these champions were just doing more work than I think was intended of them. Hunter is going away. We're losing Aphelios, Warwick, and Ashe. Kindred is staying, but as a different champion. I am kind of glad about this. I think Hunter was kind of getting out of control with how it was just picking off things a bit too much. Particularly when you started putting Death Blades on these champions, then they would get out of control a little too quickly. So, goodbye. I also don't think we really needed multiple sniper comps. So we had hunters and we had sharpshooters. I don't really feel like there was a need to have both of those in the game. This is kind of my opinion. Dazzler proved to be just a pain in the neck to balance. So I'm not sad to see Dazzler gone. It was... It just really, it looks like it was getting really difficult to balance Dazzler, and it was just kind of holding down a lot of the AD champions that I think Riot expected to be a lot better in the game. Shade's going away. Why? Because we all hate aggro trop. So goodbye, Shade. Zed is staying because Zed is immortal, and Zed will be in every TFT they ever release. But Kayn, Evelyn, they're gone. I'm not sad to see Shade go. The aggro drop was just a tear. I would not be surprised if in the future of TFT we never see an aggro drop ever again. Ever. Like, to the point that I think GA might go away. That's what I think most of the opinions go around aggro drop with TFT. Along with that, a handful of other champions are going away. Nami's going away. Hecarim's going away. Jinx is going away. Xin Zhao is going away. Jin's going away. Ahri's going away. So what you're going to notice about all the champions we said is that they basically got rid of like all of the 4 cost carries. All the 4 cost carries are now gone. They're like none of them left. We're getting an entirely new selection of 4 cost carries. Also, some of the more challenging to balance champions are going away. Nami was always going to be a kind of a pain because Nami doesn't do any damage, but you give her Ludens and Mage, and she kind of just melted the entire team. So if they ever got rid of Ludens or reworked Ludens, like, Nami would be useless. Just not see play ever. Along with the fact that she doesn't get to see play outside of Bubble Bobble builds and Ludens. So, getting rid of her was fine. Hecarim was, like, miscast. Being a Vanguard made him really awkward. Jinx and Gin. Jinx in particular proved to be difficult to balance, and I do think getting rid of Jinx is really going to hamper sharpshooters in 4.5. I'm not, like, the main reason why Sharpshooters was actually playable was because Jinx could CC like over half the board with her ult. So to see that go away makes me think Sharpshooters aren't going to be that good in this in 4.5. But we'll see. Jin Zhao, they like reworked him twice. They just never got him to work. It's really sad, but he just never found a place in the game. Jin's been around long enough, and he has melted everyone's boards long enough. It's time for somebody else to come in and melt all of our boards. And Ari, I think based on discussions that I've been hearing publicly from Riot personnel involved with TFT, the big flashy AoE spellcaster is something that no one really likes anymore. I think a lot of people find it really frustrating to balance, really frustrating to play against, and the only people who really enjoy it are people who are doing it. So I wouldn't be surprised if we never see a champion like Ari, like our old Pirate Master from set 3, Gangplank. Don't be surprised if we don't see champions like this ever again. Changes to some of the champions. So Diana is now becoming a Spirit Assassin. We'll talk about Spirit because Spirit got some changes to it. So there's a little bit to talk about there. Zed is now a Ninja Slayer. Kindred is now a Spirit Executioner. And Morgana is now an Enlightened Siphoner. So all of these 3 new traits. Also, it's not on here, but I believe Pike is also becoming a Slayer. I believe it's Slayer. Yeah, he's becoming a Slayer. So, let's go through some of the things being added. So, the first new trait being added, this is a trait, not a class. The origin, not a class. Yes. Is Dragon Soul. So, you guys can read this, but I'm going to read it from a more updated set of information that they have. The first Dragon Soul to take damage from combat receives Dragon's Blessing. While blessed, the unit gains bonus stats, and every 5th attack fires a Dragon Soul blast, dealing bonus magic damage. On death, this blessing passes to the nearest Dragon Soul ally. So this is a 369 piece, so you need 3 to initiate this Dragon Soul buff. It gives an extra 40 attack, 40 AS, so attack. I think that's attack speed, I think that's a mistype. I think that's supposed to be AD. So I'm assuming that's supposed to be AD. So an extra 40 AD and an extra 40 SP, so spell power. And gains, the blast deals damage based on how much health you have. So a lot of the thought is that this trait's going to be very good for, that item I've actually completely forgotten. Do I actually have the thing for it? Yeah, it's the item I never make because it's awful. That uses 2 belts that gives you an extra 1,000 health. I'm sorry, I don't know the name of that item. I have actually removed it from my mind. Warmogs. We don't make more Warmogs, but this is probably a excuse to make Warmogs. So, like I said, the way it's going to work, you're going to take these champions. You're going to have one in the front line that you want to get the initial Dragon Soul on. And then after he dies, that Dragon Soul is going to pass on to the rest of your Dragon Soul champions based on whoever's closest. Okay. So we'll talk about a few of the champions. Brand. So Brand is a Dragon Soul mage. Brand fires a AoE magic spell on the ground, and that pops up and does some AoE damage, and enemies that are caught in the center of it get stunned. So the way that I kind of view this spell is it's actually probably a lot like Nadine, where it goes and it's going to hit something and do a good bit of damage if it hits, but it takes time to get there so the unit can move out of the way. So this spell can miss, is what I'm getting at. This is actually probably a fairly decently strong spell, but it's got to hit. So kind of like Nadine. Like if it doesn't hit, it's going to be a pretty bad spell. Tristana. Tristana is basically Warmog. Not Warmog. Kog'Maw. Where the ult just makes her increase her attack speed and deal bonus damage on hit. So it's basically Kog'Maw. Braum, it's the same as Braum from set 2. Puts up a shield for X amount of time, absorbing damage, reducing damage, and blocking missiles that come in that way. Shyvana sounds freaking awesome. So Shyvana sounds like she is actually going to be one of the carries for Dragon Soul. So when Shyvana gets her mana full, she transforms into a dragon, jumps backwards, which is I think really important to this. And her attacks become ranged and do AoE magic damage. Actually, I don't think it's AoE. I think it's dot magic damage. So you frontline Shyvana. Shyvana gets whacked, becomes a Dragon Soul because Shyvana got whacked. Flies backwards, so all the things behind her now take aggro, while she comes in and just hurls fire at stuff. This sounds really cool. This is probably really cool, and I'm going to actually enjoy it. Like I said, this is probably a pretty solid 3-cost carry for Dragon Soul. So I think we'll be pretty happy to have this in the game. Olaf. Nothing has changed about Olaf. He is the same Olaf from set 2. The only thing that has changed is that the Berserker trait that gave him the AoE attack is now linked to his ult. So, yeah. He's going to ult, and then he gets his AoE. He increases attack speed, immunity, crowd control, and gets that cone cleave. He's also a Slayer, which we'll cover Slayer later, but that's very, very relevant to Olaf, and probably makes him really strong and one of the better carries in this set. But I've done some experimentation. Building a composition with him is not easy. Aurelion Soul. So they did something really cool with Aurelion Soul. So unlike Ahri, where being able to cast twice was never really useful, so having the mage trait was not great on Ahri, they made the mage trait actually pretty good on Aurelion Soul. So the way Aurelion Soul works, he fires a lightning beam towards the furthest enemy that deals X amount of damage. So I imagine it probably looks like Vel'Koz, but is not sweeping, just a linear cannon of death. And all enemies hit by that are overcharged for 10 seconds. If they get hit again, this attack does an extra 50% bonus damage. So if you have Mage active, not only does this hit twice, the second attack gets an extra 50% bonus damage. This is a really good change. I actually like how this is designed. I'm curious how this is going to play into Dragon Soul. It probably doesn't, but I like what they're trying to do here. And lastly, Swain. So Swain is the same Swain from set 1. I didn't play set 1, but apparently Swain was busted as hell. So when Swain ults, he transforms into a dragon for 6 seconds, gains extra health ranging from 60 to 100% based on his star level, dealing 75 or 150 damage, magic damage each second to each enemy within 2.5 hexes. Whew, a lot of damage. And while in dragon form, every 2 seconds, Swain breathes fire as a cone in front of him, dealing 175 to 350 magic damage. Burning enemies for 25% of their maximum health is true damage over 10 seconds, and reducing healing by 50%. That's a lot of stuff Swain does. Not to mention, don't forget, he's Dragon Soul, so he can get that Dragon Soul buff. Yeah, Swain's going to be a monster, especially being a Siphoner, which we'll cover later. This is actually a nut unit that is going to, blow shit up. I mean, but he's a tier 5 unit, so that's what he's supposed to do. So it's an example of what a comp would look like. I have a few comps that I'll show you later about some of these. Next trait, Fabled. So Fabled is the new one. Not the new one, a new one. So this is kind of the 3-unit trait that you have to get it full to have it do anything. So you have to have all 3 of these champions or 2 of these champions and 1 of them chosen in order to happen. So the way these champions work is that each of their ults will change if you have Fabled. So they'll have an improved version of their ult if you have Fabled triggered. So what exactly are their ults? So Nautilus is essentially it's Nautilus from set 3, I think. Well, really set 2 and 3 were the same. But the big difference is with the Fabled bone. Well, actually, I believe the stun's a lot longer now. I think the stun he does is longer now. It's 346. Magic damage is decent, 300, 450, 1200. But what's really big is if you have Fabled, he also gives himself a shield that reduces incoming damage by 75% for 5 seconds. He can, like, this is like tank carry levels amount of shielding, in my opinion. That is so much shielding. 75% damage for 5 seconds. Whew. Not to mention that if you like solo frontline him, he just gets beat on while he's reducing this damage and just ults again. I actually think this is a really cool design, and he like literally I think can carry. Next up is Nico. This is essentially set 2 Nico, if I've got this right. So set 2 Nico was actually pretty weak, but like the idea was it was woodlands, so you just like did cool woodlands things, and Nico was kind of your DPS in that. What's unique about her is that she's also a mystic carry, and we haven't had one of those since set 3 Cassiopeia. So I'm kind of interested to see what comes of this. So the ult is the same as what she had in set 2. She throws a seed that explodes multiple times with increasing AoE on each explosion. And if you have the Fabled bonus, the third explosion does 3 times the damage. So if you have Fabled, this is your carry. I actually had a lot of struggles trying to come up with what a composition for Fabled looks like, but I did come up with one in the end. I kind of cheated. It's actually probably the easiest one you can think of because I couldn't come up with anything else. Lastly is Cho'gath. So Cho'gath, this is essentially set 3 Cho'gath again. But the big difference is I think this actually does a lot more damage than it did before. The ult. So the ult does 200, 400, 1500 damage. And the AoE knockup is 2.5, 8 seconds. The 8 second knockup sounds insane for 4 calls. They might have to bring that down. But his Fabled bonus is now his ult will knock up the entire board. It won't damage the entire board, but it'll knock up the entire board. That's going to trigger somebody. Somebody going to get triggered by a 3-star Cho'gath stunning their entire board for 8 seconds. That's just going to happen, guys. Just deal with it. Alright, next change. Next origin. Siphoners. So, Siphoners heal allies and themselves with the damage they do by spells and attacks. So they, like, have a built-in HP regen on all damage dealt. So think of it as like a healing rolled Hand of Justice on each of these champions, but for a certain amount. So 2 Siphoners heals 10% for your allies and 40% for your Siphoners. 4 Siphoners heals 25% for allies and 100% of the damage for Siphoners. I actually think this might be a little too strong, and that this, I assume, is going to get toned down, because I think this is, particularly on Swain, it's going to get a little out of control very quickly. But let's go through the new champions. So Nasus, this is a new Nasus. He has a divine trait. Nasus withers an enemy with the highest percentage health, dealing 400, 600, 1000 damage over 5 seconds, slowing their attack speed and movement speed by 50% by this duration. This is actually busted. I'm not gonna lie to you. This is actually completely busted. This is how you pick out a target. This is how you pick out a carry, make it do 50% of its damage, make it not be able to go anywhere, and make it take way too much damage. Damage is going to, either they're going to tone down the attack speed debuff, which I don't think they'll do, or they're going to tone down the damage over time, because that's way too much damage in my opinion. I actually really like Nasus. I think he carries very well into the late game. If you need him, which is kind of an issue with Divine, is that you never want to carry Wukong into the late game because he doesn't do anything. Whereas Nasus will pick out things that haven't been damaged, aka a backline carry, and then make it so that they attack slow and have less movement speed. This is a very strong ability he has. Vladimir, so my understanding of Vladimir, this is essentially the Vladimir we had in set 2, but his ult does slightly less damage now. Well, actually, I think it does about the same damage. So it's 350, 500 350, 500, 750. I think that's actually works out to be about the same amount of damage. But nearby allies are healed for 40% of that damage dealt. So he becomes a fairly good frontliner. Kind of like how Vladimir in the last set, in set 2, was a frontline mage. He can play as a frontline Siphoner that heals up all your frontline units. So I actually kind of like this design. Also, Morgana has been changed to an Enlightened Siphoner. So the way this works now is her ult used to have this Siphon effect built in, but they're swapping it out so that now her ult now has a built-in Dazzler effect, and she gets the Siphoner ability through her trait. So that's how Morgana works now. Oh, and Swain has Siphoner too, so yay. Slayer. Let me get to my notes on Slayer. First thing, Slayer is not going to be a 2-4-6 trait. It's going to be a 3-6 trait. I don't know. I haven't figured out how I feel about that. I think it probably makes sense in that the way Slayer functions. So let me explain how Slayer functions. Slayer gains lifesteal that increases at lower health and increases and deals bonus damage that increases based off target's missing health. So when a Slayer has lower health, they gain more lifesteal. When an opponent has less health, Slayer does more damage. Okay? So one thing you'll notice is that there's a lot of lifesteal now. There's a lot more sustain in this set, which I think is actually kind of a nice thing. And I'll be curious to see what it looks like. But like I said, the idea is that a Slayer is meant to be have more sustain. It's going to run up, bash things, gain health back on bashing things. So right now there are actually 6 Slayers. I know they say there are 5, but there's actually 6. So you have Zed, Darius, Olaf, Tryndamere, Samara, and the one they added in was Pike. So Pike's going to be another 3-unit champion, which is good. I have thoughts on 3-unit champions. Finish my drink here. So the three trait champions, I like them. I think having more of them is actually a good thing. What I don't like is when some of those traits are kind of cheapy traits, or like, how do I want to say this? Or they're on a 4 cost. I think 4 cost is another issue I kind of have with these triple traded champions. The problem with 4 cost is 4 cost champions end up being very contested, whereas you don't see that as much on 3 cost champions and 2 cost champions. At the same time, like the cheapy traits, I poke at Shen a lot on this. Shen has Adept, Ninja, and Mystic. Like, you're going to have 2 Adepts, and you're going to have 2 Mystics, and you're going to have 1 Ninja. You're not going to, like, explode on those traits. So what you find is that everyone and their brother can flex Shen into their comp. I don't think Pike will have this problem because there is not a lot of overlap between Cultist, Assassin, and Slayer. So I think that for Pike to have it is fine, outside the fact that Pike is one of the stronger 2-cost champions in the game. But going back to Slayer, like I said, Slayer is meant to bash brains in and gain health back, have sustain. I kind of view it as kind of like being Berserker, where Berserker was kind of its own front line. Berserker would just bash things in the face, and that was it was a self-fulfilling prophecy in that it did damage. It did damage through front lines, and was your front line at the same time. That's kind of how I view Slayer. I think the real question with Slayer is whether it's a trait you're going to play a lot at 6 or whether it's a trait you're going to play a lot at 3. I honestly don't know. We're going to have to see how that falls out. Anyway, let's talk about some of the new champions in that. Here we go. So Darius is back. It's essentially the Darius from set 3, but they've reworked him a bit. So while dunking, he does his dunks, do 500, 750, 1250 damage at each star level. While dunking, he is unstoppable, so you can't CC to stop him. And if he kills a target, he recasts. So he'll go and dunk on another target, but now each successive recast is 20% reduced damage. Positive change. I'm glad we can no longer watch Darius infinite off entire teams. Very, very happy to see that. The next champion, Tryndamere. So I've looked at Tryndamere a lot, and I'm not quite sure exactly how he's going to work out. He also is a 3-trait champion. He's a Warlord, Duelist, Slayer. Like I said before, I don't think there's a lot of overlap here. I'm not quite sure how you're going to make a lot of use out of this. But so the way Tryndamere works is he spins towards the most enemies in a line, dealing 100% of his AD to enemies in his path, and empowers his next 3 auto attacks to do 75%, 100%, 200% additional damage by star level. So I'm going to have to see him in action to really understand how it works. But the way I kind of envision it is you put him in the front line, and he does this spinny tornado attack animation into your opponent's backline, and then beats them in the head 3 times and kills them. That's kind of how I think a Tryndamere works. I could be wrong on that. I honestly don't know. But it sounds interesting. The idea is for him to be an alternate carry in Warlord. That's the main goal I think they had in making Tryndamere, is for him to be a carry in Warlord, because right now the only carry in Warlord really is Katarina. Alright, next trait, Executioner. Executioner's attacks and spells always critically hit targets below a certain percentage threshold of health. So it essentially is Valkyrie, but now you have breakpoints. So it's a 2-3-4 trait again. So we're returning to the 2-3-4 traits, but the breakpoints are at 2 Executioner, 33%, at 3 Executioner, 66%, at 4 Executioner, 99%. So if a unit has taken damage and you have 4 Executioners triggered, everything crits. Everything crits. Everything crits. 66% if you have 3, 33% if you have 2. I predict personally that the 66% might be a bit too high and the 33% might be a bit too low, and the 99% is just right. But we'll see how that goes. Anyway, Kindred is going to become an Executioner, which I think makes Kindred a lot better than Hunter Kindred, to be honest. Having her spell crit makes her really, really strong. Kale, yes, Kale is back, but no longer is she a Blade Master, she is Divine. And Zaya is making a comeback with a completely new toolkit that we're going to spend forever staring at and trying to figure out what the hell does. So Kale, it's the exact same Kale from set 3. Kale ascends, causing her attacks to launch waves that deal 100, 175, 600 bonus magic damage. So you get your Kale, you make her ult, she starts floaty, she sword, that does wave damage, so it's like a linear chain attack that blows everything up. Kale's going to be good. The big difference is you no longer have Blade Master, but instead you get Divine, so you get true damage. Enjoy. That can crit. Enjoy. I'm looking forward to see Kale, but I'm kind of curious as to how the best way to build Kale in a comp is now, because Divine is lackluster as a sub comp, but is pretty good as a major comp. So like running it as a 2, like having 2 Divine, like never feels like it does anything, whereas having 4 or 6 Divine, really strong. Xayah. I've looked at Xayah 100 times. I still don't really understand what Xayah does. I still don't know how to put items on Xayah. This Xayah is wild. Okay, so Xayah's ability. It costs 100 mana, so it's an expensive ability. And she's an Elderwood Keeper, which is going to be weird, but Elderwood got another Keeper that we'll talk about later. So, Xayah leaps into the air, becoming untargetable, invulnerable, and throwing out a fan of feather daggers that deal 300%, 325, 375% of her AD as physical damage to enemies within the cone. My understanding is that she does a cone AoE, throws the feathers at every enemy in that cone. She only throws one feather at each enemy, and it only hits each enemy once. Then Xayah recalls her feathers, striking enemies hit for 100, 200, 400 magic damage per feather. So she sends out the feathers, that's just damage based on AE, and then pulls it back based off magic damage. I don't know what to do with this, to be honest. I really don't know. I don't know how to build. I'm assuming you give her IE. I think that's the obvious math I do in my head. You give her IE because she's Executioner, so her spell can theoretically crit at the breakpoints. But after that, I don't know how to position her. I don't know what this cone looks like. I don't know how much stuff it blows up. But she's clearly built to be a carry that does a ton of damage. So I'm going to have to see what she looks like to figure out how to play her. Next, the new Tier 5 champion. Let me scroll on down my notes to them. Let me make sure that we don't cover the other champion changes. Oh, okay, they do. So, first off is Oren. So, Oren is interesting. So, Oren does his Call of the Forge God ultimate thing. So, it's mostly a utility ability. So, he'll summon an elemental from behind the furthest enemy to travel towards him, slowing the attack speed of enemies hit by 50% for 3 seconds and dealing 150, 250, 750 magic damage. If the elemental runs into Oren, he headbutts it, redirecting it towards another distant enemy, stunning for 1.5 to 15 seconds and dealing 150, 250, 750 magic damage. Okay. So, he's going to, from the furthest enemy, cast his ult. The thing is going to run through everything that it hits, going to get an attack speed slowdown to 50% for 3 seconds and take some damage. Then he's going to bash it back at the next furthest enemy. I'm assuming it's next. It says another distance, so I'm assuming it's the next furthest enemy. And that one, that hit back will stun and deal the same amount of damage again. The way that Oren has been described is that he is probably more in line on the battlefield as a 4 cost. He's not going to provide frontline. He's not going to provide damage. He's going to provide some amount of utility. Not like mind-blowing amounts of utility, but some amounts of utility. Like, this ult is basically a very, very poor man's version of Azir. It's very poor man's version of Azir. So, he's not on the battlefield as a great champion. But he has Blacksmith. So, Blacksmith, after participating in combat, so he has to be on the battlefield, blacksmiths will begin forging an artifact item. The higher their star level, the faster they work. Once an artifact is complete, it will be able to be bestowed on an ally. So, he makes items. He makes unique items, like completely new items we've never seen before. And it takes a handful of turns for him to do that. So, what I believe is going to go on PBE is that he requires 4 turns for one item at 1 star, 3 turns for one item at 2 star, and at 3 star, I believe he makes an item every turn. Because, I mean, you got a 3-star 5 cost. Come on, people. So, what are some of these items? Let's go ahead and scroll on down. So, there are 3 examples here. Rocket Propelled Fist. So also, don't deny, these stat increases are actually very high on these items. So Rocket Propelled Fist gives an additional 15 mana, 25 armor, and 200 health. At the start of combat, the wearer pulls the furthest enemy into melee range, stunning them for 1.5 seconds. Allies within range will prioritize attacking that enemy. It's Blitzcrank on a stick. It's literally Blitzcrank on a stick. I don't know who came up with this idea. This is actually a really cool item that I really love just like staring at and listening to. But yeah, it's Blitzcrank on a stick. Another item, Manazani. So it's called Maramana here. It's Manazani, I believe is what it's called now. So after the wearer casts its first spell in combat, they restore 100 mana, and it's not said here, they restore 100 mana over 4 seconds. So 100 mana would basically mean, oh, I'm just going to put this on Xylan and watch him, like, give an GA across my entire team. But it's actually going to be over 4 seconds, so that means it gives a lot more champions utility, because you can get multiple cast off in that 4 seconds, rather than just put it on Xylan, he fully manas and ults again. I think most people believe this is probably one of the most powerful items that you can get. So, yeah, keep your eye on it, because it's probably pretty busted if you make it. And lastly, they call it Trinity Force. For some reason, they called it Infinity Force. I don't know why. I like the name Trinity Force, because it adds 33 stat to everything. The only thing it doesn't add to is dodge chance. It does not give you 30% dodge chance, because that would make you immortal. I've seen it happen. I played mech. Samara. So Samara is another champion that they're adding in that we're going to have to actually see before we really understand what exactly is going on here. And I think she's also been pretty heavily reworked in like the past couple of days from when this article was posted. So the first thing about Samara is Samara does not use mana. Samara does not use the traditional mana system. The explanation on why that is because the mana system limits what they can do to a champion, and if they want to do something really crazy, they need to do something else, because you can break. It's happened before. We can break the mana system. We can do it again. So, let's talk about some of the particulars here. Starting with Daredevil. Daredevil is her, I guess, class. I guess. Daredevils seek the thrill. No, actually, it's a trait. It's an origin. Daredevil is an origin. Slayer and Sharpshooter are classes. Daredevils seek the thrill of battle, dashing after every other attack. After every dash, they shield themselves for 20% of their max health, and their next attack fires 2 shots, gaining style. At max style, they cast their spell. Base style rank increases star level. So Samara is basically Devil May Cry Dante. We go in, we pew pew, we move, get health, pew pew, pew pew pew, and you do this all over again until you ult. And from what I've seen about her ult, she blows up the entire battlefield. So to describe the ult, Samara dashes and becomes unstoppable, unleashing 4 shots per second at 3 enemies within 2.5 hexes for 2 seconds, for a total of 24 shots. For that duration, Samara has 100% dodge chance. She's a sharpshooter. She's firing 24 shots. She's a sharpshooter. That's 48 hits with 2 sharpshooters. 48. So if you give Samara a Deathblade, and you have Sharpshooter, Slayer active, because why not just have both active? Yeah, you're going to wreck everything within that 2.5 hexes. Everything within that 2.5 hexes is just dead because of the Sharpshooter procs. I don't even think you really need the Itemizer. I think if you give her a Deathblade, she is broken. Like, that's kind of my view of what Samara looks like she does, is that if you give her a Deathblade, she's going to destroy an entire board. That simple. I think there's probably going to have to be some work done on Samara to make sure she doesn't blow up the entire game. I also think this 100% dodge chance is yeah, that's not going to hold. That's you may I'm not even sure Unstoppable should stay with this ult. But that said, we don't really know how hard it is to get this ultimate off. How much style you have to gain. I'm assuming it's like 6 to 7 shots to get this off. But yeah, we're gonna have to see. All right. Lastly, 2 other champions are coming in. Rakan and Sivir. So Rakan, functionally, he's similar to what we had in set 3. Similarly, so he's an Elderwood keeper. So this is actually big that he's keeper, because we have Xayah, who's a keeper. So you have 2 keepers now built into Elderwood. It makes Elderwood very easy to play. So the way Rakan works is Rakan dashes to the furthest enemy within his range, disarming all units he passes through for 1.523 seconds, and taunting his target. Rakan then creates a shield with 300, 550, 950 health on himself for 4 seconds. So he's a frontliner. He's a frontliner with disarm. He's also a frontliner that I don't think you can brain dead disarm. I think you actually have to like be really smart when you position him in order to make that disarm function correctly. It seems like it works like Aurelia's ult, but instead of targeting the unit directly in front, you're targeting the furthest unit within range. So Rakan's going to be a pretty important unit in this set. I can already see it now. He gives himself very big shields. He provides disarm effect. I kind of like this more than what we saw in set 3 with his ult having a knock-up effect. This is better and more interesting to me, so I kind of like this design. Speaking of designs, I really like the new Sivir design. Okay. So Sivir is a cultist sharpshooter. Sivir rallies her allies, granting them 60%, 75%, 100% attack speed for 5 seconds. Sivir gains 100, 200, 400 bonus attack damage for the duration. Sivir is a support carry. This is a new experience. In fact, if you go back and look at what I've said over all of the other cultists that are being added into the game or being changed, cultists in general are becoming more like support oriented. So it's not so much about, so the way cultists kind of work in set 4 currently is that you get a bunch of them, you summon Galio, and Galio kills everything. What those cultist champions did was kind of irrelevant. It really didn't matter. You summon Galio and kill everything. Now they actually have a lot of support utility that's going around, and I think that is very cool and very interesting. Particularly in Sivir, where this is just straight up support carry. Like, you just want this ult to be going off all the time. Like, this isn't even nearby allies. This is all allies that Sivir is giving this buff to. I really, really like the design of Sivir, and I think it's really going to change how cultists are being played, along with the fact that cultists now like have 6 units that are 3-star, that are 3 cost or less. But we'll get into that because I built up a new cultist comp that we can talk about. All right. Oh god, I need another drink. Okay. One of the other new things, I'm gonna actually go. Did they cover this here? I thought they did. Maybe they didn't. I'm just scrolling up to see if it was in here. It looks like it wasn't. The new Lucky Lantern system. I guess it really wasn't. That is very interesting. Oh, they do talk about it here. I guess they just don't go in depth about it nearly as much. Okay, so the Lucky Lantern system. At stage 2-1, 3-1, or 4-1, or not at all, a Lucky Lantern will appear. The Lucky Lantern appears for everyone at the same time, has the same thing in it, and the later you get your Lucky Lantern, the more stuff that's in it. So if you get it at 4-1, it's going to have a bunch of stuff in it. If you get it at 2-1, it might not have much stuff in it. Inside the Lucky Lantern will be gold, item components, new consumables, ooh, shiny, or Nico, Spat, Force of Nature. Okay, that's really neat. I really like this idea. This is very kind of like Galaxies, but instead of like starting the game knowing what galaxy you're in, it's just going to be a curveball thrown right at you. But let's talk about the consumables. So here are 4 examples of consumables. First is the shop reroller. It's actually been renamed to Loaded Dice, which is an infinitely cooler name to me. So when you use the Loaded Dice on a champion, it rerolls your shop free of charge, such that all units in that shop will be of the same origin or trait of the unit that you use the Loaded Dice on. So I find this very interesting because this is kind of like a Nico's in a way, but I think the value of it is actually much better in the early part of the game rather than the later part of the game. So normally you save your Nico for the later part of the game. That's just where it's more valuable. Like, it's just not valuable in the early game. Whereas the shop reroller is probably much more valuable in the early game if you want to try to get like a super win streak on, because you can use it to get not 1 champion, but like 3 champions that you need. But in the later game, like, you're not guaranteed to get the champion you want because the roll chances are still based on like the level odds of finding. So it's not like you're going to be level 2 and finding a 4 cost. That's not going to happen. So this is probably much better to use to get a bunch of champions in the early game rather than trying to find that 1 champion you really want in the late game. But really cool item here. Next, the item remover, now called the magnet remover, pops off all the items off your champion. So if you use this on a champion, so it used to be if you needed to rebuild a champion, or sometimes you would have to rebuild a champion because you need to get the items off it. You don't have to do that if you have an item remover. You can just slam those items, and then if you need to keep the champion but transfer the items, bam, slam the item remover. This is particularly, in my opinion, useful with the Chosen system, because sometimes you'll make a 2 cost, and you'll just throw items on it, and then you'll see that Chosen come up again, and you want to put that Chosen in to get the Chosen buff, but you don't want to move those items over. You want to be able to move those items over, but you can't without selling the champion. Slam the item remover, pick them up, throw them on the Chosen champion. Bam, good. Next one, the item remover, also known as the Reforger. So if you use this on a champion, it'll pop off the items and re-roll all those items. So the idea being, if you use it on a champion with a fully completed component, you get a new entirely completed item. If you use it on a partial component, you get a new partial component. This one's not as interesting, but I see it as useful in situations where you opened up the game making a suboptimal item, and you just want to roll to see if you can get something better. And you have a bad component, which, like, I don't think I'd re-roll like a single item more than a single component. I'm going to have to think of how best to use this. I don't think this has as much value as some of the other items. But, like, the way I see it is, like, if I have belt, cloak, and I have an item reroller, I will slam that belt, cloak, and use the item reroller to get a new completed item and not a cloak. Just kind of an idea. Last one, Training Dummy. Actually called Training Dummy. So, this unit allows you to basically place an Azir soldier on the battlefield. Like, that's pretty much how it's been described, is that this is an Azir soldier. You use it, and boom, you have an Azir soldier for the rest of the game. It's not for the individual round. It lasts for the entire game. It also gets stronger as the game goes on. I believe as you hit stage 5, it becomes a 2-star, where it has additional health. All right. Now for some other system changes that are not noted in this particular update that they dropped. I'm going to go ahead and scroll it back up because I can. System changes. So base shop odds. So for the PBE, they're changing the base shop odds again. At level 8, it's now going your chance of finding a 5 cost is now going down to 4% from 5%. So it was 5%, now moving down to 4%. At level 9, it's going from 15% to 12%. This is pretty simple. 5 costs are too common right now. In the current version of the game, there are too many 5 costs being played, and there shouldn't be that many 5 costs being played. It's that simple. Are people going to high roll and still do it? Yeah, of course they are. But you're not going to have 3 people doing it anymore. That's how I view this change. A lot of people are pointing that the 15 to 12 is really significant. The 5 to 4 is actually like just as significant. Like percentage wise, both of them are just as significant as one another. All right, trait changes. Assassin. So Assassin 2 is too easy to build, so it's going from 30 to 25. Assassin 6 is going from a 90% crit strike bonus to 120% crit strike bonus. I don't know if this is enough to play Assassin 6, but then I look at it and realize, wow, that's a lot of damage. I'm pretty sure Talon will one-shot an entire board on his resets. Well, he doesn't reset anymore, so he just like jumps and just ults and kills again, I guess. Cultist. I'm going to save you the explanation of Cultist. Cultist 3 is getting a nerf. Cultist 6 is getting a slight nerf. Cultist 9 is getting a slight buff. There. That's because that the cultists were all moved. A bunch of cultists were moved down to lower levels. There are now 2 1-cost cultists, 2 2-cost cultists, and 2 3-cost cultists. So you can build 6 cultists without even finding a chosen at like level 4. Well, level 5 technically. I guess you'll have it chosen then, but whatever. You guys get my point. It's way easier to build cultists now. Duelist. Duelist 6 is getting a buff. It's going from 35% attack speed per stack to 40% attack speed per stack. I don't know what Duelist is going to look like in this patch on this PBE. I really don't know. I suspect it's still going to be more of the same reroll Yasuo into Yone, but I honestly don't know. Elderwood, they're basically reverting the Elderwood buffs that we got on the last base game patch. Enlightened. This is a big one, I think. So there's an Enlightened champion going away and they're not replacing. So Nami is gone and nothing is replacing Nami. So Enlightened 4 is going from a 70% bonus mana gain to 100%. And Enlightened 6, which now requires a Chosen, you need a Chosen to get this, is going from 100% bonus magic gain to 200% bonus magic gain. Yeah, that's not staying. I can't. I see no world where that stands. No world. That's going to make Morgana alt all the time. Like, literally all the time. Probably makes Morgana better with blue buff than Sojin's. Actually, that's not true. Sojin's will probably still be better. Yeah, Sojin's will probably still be better. I really like the change to Enlightened here. They're going to be making Enlightened function, but without blowing up everything else in the game. Keeper, I believe they added more keepers, so Keeper is getting like across the board nerf. So Keeper 2 is going from 150 shield to 125. Keeper 2, 225 to 200. Keeper 6 going from 350 to 250. Fair. Mage. This is an interesting. So Mage, I believe if I did my math right, we're losing 3 mages but getting 2 more. So Mage will no longer be a 369 because that doesn't make any sense because you actually cannot make 9 without. In order to make 9, you would need to have 2 mages, caps, and a chosen. Yeah, that's not going to happen. Let's not do that. So Mage is going to be the first build going from 369 to 357. So you need 3 to get the double cast, and then you get spell power buffs at 5 and 7. So 3 mage 80%, 5 mage 110%, 7 mage 150%. I kind of twiddled around with mage a bit. I'm not quite sure what it looks like right now. I'm not quite sure how to play it. I'm assuming your main carry, like, what's weird is because you have 2 main carries in mage, in Vigar and Aurelion Soul, and I'm not quite sure which. I don't know which one's better. Mystic's getting a buff at 4 and 6 because no one plays it. I'm not even going to talk about those buffs. Sharpshooter is getting a little bit of a rework. Why? Because they got rid of Jin and Jinx. Without those two champions, Sharpshooter is way weaker. So Sharpshooter 2 now gets 2 bounces. Sharpshooter 4 gets 3 bounces. And Sharpshooter 6 gets 4 bounces. So you get an additional bounce across the board if you have Sharpshooter proc. But the damage reduction has been increased at the 2 spot. So it does 60% less damage at Sharpshooter 2. Okay? Per bounce. So it's a pretty significant drop off from there. Meanwhile, the 6 one actually, like, the reduction went down. It went from 45 to 35. So it actually does more damage now, which is wild to me. But I don't think it matters that much because I don't think you're going to ever play Sharpshooter 6. All right, and lastly, Spirit got changed. So Spirit used to work that it was you get an attack speed boost based on the mana of the spell being cast. Now it's just a flat boost. So Spirit 2 is a 20% attack speed boost on the cast. Spirit 4 is a 35% attack speed boost on the cast. This is probably a big buff to Yuumi, actually, in my opinion. They couldn't keep it as is because they brought back Diana as a spirit, and her mana cost I think was like 80, might even be higher than that. But yeah, they couldn't keep those numbers as is with a 1 cost giving that much attack speed bonus. So they set it at a hard rate, and I kind of like it, and I think it's going to make Yuumi in particular a lot better. Because Yuumi is going to give so much attack speed across the board to so many things. It's going to be wild. Alright, some changes. I'll just kind of gloss over some of these because some of them aren't too important. Diana is becoming a spirit and gets a whole bunch of buffs because they don't have to worry about Moonlight mucking up the works. Pike is actually like... Pike's getting a pretty good... is getting a slight damage nerf, whereas his mana, like, for first ult is going down, but total ult is going to happen more often. It's not a big change there. Zed is getting attack speed boost, and he's passively going to have the teleport to the backline. So, like, shades go to the backline. Zed is still going to have that backline jump. Just, he's no longer going to be a shade because he's a slayer. We talked about Kindred's now a Spirit Executioner, which is, I think, a big buff to Kindred. I think that makes Kindred way better. Veigar on PBE. So we talked about Veigar on the patch notes that they changed his mana cost to go up to 0.55. On PBE, he's going up to 30.70. So essentially, he actually will get his first ult off even faster. But the second ult is going to take a lot longer to get. In return, he's also getting attack speed boost. A lot of people think this is too much of a nerf on Veigar. I'm not quite sure because you still get that first ult off. And I think the first ult on Veigar is what's really important. Aatrox got the buffs that we saw on the regular patch notes. So the extra up to 70 armor, 850 HP. Morgana. So Morgana now keeps her... Morgana on the regular game has an inherent siphon effect. That siphon effect has now been moved to the trait, and the Dazzler effect has now been moved to the spell. Okay? Simple? Nice? Simple. Azir on PBE is getting a nerf. The knock-up duration is now 1.5 seconds from 2 seconds, and the slow duration, which I think is most important, goes from 4 to 3. I really wish this had shipped on the main game. I really think the slow duration in particular is really obnoxious on Azir. Lee Sin gets a damage nerf. Doesn't really matter. I don't think it matters. Yone is... armor and MR shred is going from 60% to 40%. I think I've said this before. Don't be surprised if on this PBE, Yone gets an entire rework. Because I don't think Yone, as he is working right now, with his... 2 ults, one doing the shred and the other murdering everything, is going to last very long. Lastly, item changes. Hextech Gunblade, the max shield from that is going from 400 to 300. I have no qualms about that. That's a decent change. And Runan's Hurricane is going from 90% of AD to 80% of AD, and I have no idea why they didn't do this before the last patch. I think that was a big mistake, dumping Hurricane down to 90% and not going all the way down to 80. I think 90 was simply not enough. Anyway, that's all I have for the changes that have come to the PBE that is up now. So I'm going to, I kind of messed around a little bit. I was making up some new builds for the PBE. So I'm going to quickly go through a couple of the ones I came up with just to kind of test with. I probably won't play much of the PBE. I'll probably stick with the main game to see how much I can get back to the LP I threw away the past few weeks. So the first one I have is a Cultist build. I know Cultist isn't new, but Cultist is actually very new in that it got so many champion changes that it's actually pretty interesting now how you can play it. So my idea for this composition was to make Sivir a carry, where the idea was to just have Sivir ult as much as possible to give a huge attack speed boost to everything on the board. And this would be useful with Samara just kind of blowing everything up, Swain blowing everything up, I guess. And Vladimir providing health regen to all of your front lines, Xylan doing Xylan things. I think Cultist is going to be a very interesting composition on 4.5, mostly because it's going to be a lot... The transitions of Cultists are going to be a bit more interesting, and it's going to be a bit more easier to do, I suppose, mostly because there are just so many more cheap Cultists you can play. You have 2 at 1 cost, 2 at 2 cost, 3 at 3 cost, and now only 1 at 4 and 5 cost. So Cultist becomes a much better early game comp that you can easily set up 6 Cultists on. Like, very easily. And then you can use that to streak into the late game, make your big transition into maybe a board like this, but you keep Cultist. Or, if you want to, you can dump out 3 of these Cultists and just, keep Sivir as the carry for whatever, pile of 5 cost you want to run. So another idea I had. Look at the next one. So this is Divine Kale. Made a Divine Kale comp. It was kind of obvious to me to make a Divine Kale comp. So the idea here is really the power of the build is in Yuumi. So you have Yuumi ult so that Yuumi goes over to Jax to heal and then runs back to Kale to give Kale the attack speed boost. At the same time, you also have Kindred, so you have Spirit, so you get more attack speed boost. The idea here is just to get a bunch of attack speed on Kale. I would not be surprised if this build is actually 4 Spirit. It would not surprise me to see 4 Spirit Kale. That's probably more in line with the Chrono Kale builds we saw in set 3. I think another bonus to this comp is the ability to run Nasus. I think Nasus is going to be actually one of the 1 costs that just lasts through the game because the ability always just has good utility. But yeah, this is a interesting one to build. I think I don't think this will be the premiere version. I think someone will probably come up with something that's a little better, but this version is probably pretty good. Next one, Dragon Soul. I tried to make an Olaf Dragon Soul carry. So the idea is the idea is any of these 3 up front get bashed on and trigger Dragon Soul. And you can make any of these 3 your carry. And then in the back line, you just have... I'm not sure how to position Samara because I'm not quite sure if putting it like this would lock her in place. But the idea is that most of the damage comes in on the front line, having Dragon Soul trigger, and just watching Olaf become invincible and be your last champion left. Pretty basic stuff. Oh yeah, and having Slayer on. I think if you're going to run an Olaf carry, you're always going to have Slayer on or run a Bloodthirster. I don't think you're going to be able to get away from that. Let's see, what did I have next? Oh, Fabled. So I kind of, I was struggling at first to come up with a good Fabled build. But in the end, I ended up landing on this. So this is basically Vanguard Mystic. The idea with this Vanguard Mystic is that Nico is your carry, but Nautilus is also kind of your carry. So Nautilus, based on the way that his new ult in Fabled works, he kind of becomes immortal. So you just, stack up defensive items on him and just kind of laugh. as he just gets hit in the face over and over again and just ults over and over again and doesn't really care at all. In the meantime, you have Nico in the background just blowing up seeds onto everything and knocking out everything. And at the same time, you can also fit in Oren and build some artifacts to maybe get some more utility out on the battlefield. Like, this I think is actually probably a pretty good build to play. Unlike the last few I've posted up here. I tried to make 6 Slayer. I wasn't quite sure how to do 6 Slayer. Gonna be honest. You don't really have a front line. You just kind of rely on like Yuumi tricking on Olaf and just having Olaf carry everything. At the same time, you run Sivir to get attack speed boosts for your whole team. I don't really know what else to say here. This was kind of a pop-up idea of just how fast could I get Olaf to attack. And the idea here being Tryndamere takes damage, Olaf walks up so that Yuumi will eventually ult and go to Olaf. Well, like, go to Tryndamere and then go to Olaf, because Tryndamere is probably going to get, like, crushed. Or go to Pike, because Pike might get crushed. And then just fly back to Olaf. Another option actually is probably more like this, where Yuumi would run back to Samara and make Samara attack faster. And lastly, Enlightened Siphoner. This is one I actually kind of like, because I think there's actually, much like early on in set 4, there's a lot of flexibility in Enlightened. So if you notice here, I didn't pick any Chosens. Like, here's just 9 champions. Just ignore Shen for a minute. Here's 8 champions that I think are basically core to just playing Enlightened Siphoner. And then based on what Chosen you have, you can do whatever you want. So you have a Siphoner Chosen? Well, you can just drop Nasus. You don't need Nasus. And that leaves you just put in Shen. So your board may look more like this. Got an Enlightened Chosen? I think the play with Enlightened Chosen now is to go Enlightened 6. That's going to probably be very different, because you're going to run 5 Enlightened champions, Pike, and I assume you probably still run... You're going to run something else to frontline, because you'll have nothing to frontline but like a Fiora, which is really depressing. You get an Adept Chosen, your board's probably this. I'm going to be honest, your board's probably this. You get an Assassin Chosen. I assume you run Assassin 4. Assassin 4 looks pretty good to play. Divine Chosen. Maybe you have an additional Divine that you can throw in over you're not going over Vladimir. Mystic Chosen. You could throw in Xylan after dumping probably Nasus. And then if you want to, you can drop Vladimir and go a different direction. So like I'm saying, like, this is very flexible. You can actually just play whatever you want here, based on whatever Chosen you get. I think this was actually probably going to be along the lines of the most flexible composition that you can play in set 4.5. So I'm looking forward to seeing what people do. The PBE is live right now. I still have a couple other things to talk about. Just kind of a bonus. Fates Pass for set 4.5 will be up. Just kind of going over some of the things that are being in it. Some of the new booms. I really like this one. This one's probably going to be my new boom. Some of the new eggs you can get. New arenas. I'll quickly pop some of these up so you can see. This one looks cool. Okay, it opened up a new window. I didn't expect it to open up a new window. Just kind of pop through some of these. I really like the design of this one, that it's just like more of a club. Some of the new little legends. I'm actually not interested in these new little legends. I don't think they're as cool. And then some of the new premium arenas. So like I was saying, the club. This is more the club. Or this one, which didn't load right. Boo. Okay, it's just not going to load right. Oh, no. Never mind, my internet crashed. Oh, well. I'll just go through the rest of this for the video's sake. And along with that, there's some new bundles that include some new booms. And some mega bundles that gives you some new eggs. So, that's all I've got for the new set that has dropped out. So, like, you'll be able to look at some of the big streamers that are playing on the PBE to kind of get some ideas of what they're doing. There's going to be a lot of changes on the PBE as it goes around. I think as it stands, what I threw out were some just kind of idea builds to try out. I like some of the ideas that are here. There's a lot more focus on sustainment and frontline, something that is like very lacking in the current TFT. Just there's not their front lines just kind of get blown up and don't do anything, and there's not a lot of like close range melee carries. It's mostly just a couple of like backline access or snipers. So I look forward to seeing what the meta looks like and how things are going to change, because I don't think what they've put out is balanced in any way, and I think Riot knows that it's not balanced in any way, and we're going to see a lot of changes as they go along. So that's all I've got for this video. I hope everyone kind of enjoyed it. It's a little long, but I wanted to cover everything as I saw in depth all at once, so I didn't have to go through this again. But yeah, that's it. Peace.